Hello and welcome to this segment of Arts Talk. I'm Sherri Burr, your host, and my guest for this segment is an amazing person who's a law student and also an actor, Dan Cornish. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So Dan, we're here to talk about your new film, The Merry Maids of Madness. So why don't you tell the audience what the film is about?
Right. Well, thank you, Sherri. The Merry Maids of Madness is an original script written by Jen Daugherty, who's a graduate of UNM Department of Theater and Dance, directed by Philip Hughes, who's a graduate of the USC Masters Film School. And The Merry Maids of Madness is based on all of Shakespeare's women characters. Not all of them are represented, but the major players such as Beatrice from Much Ado About Nothing, Kate from Taming of the Shrew, very colorful characters. And they are all placed in a modern context in the Stratford Home for Rest and Rehabilitation.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, so what kind of rest and rehabilitation are they receiving?
So essentially, it's a sort of an institution, a volunteer institution. I believe a couple of the maids were committed. I think Kate was committed. Without giving too many spoilers away, I'll tell you that Kate may or may not have pushed her husband off a balcony. Patricia. And Beatrice, the protagonist, the main heroine in this story, she left Benedict at the altar for a sandwich.
For a sandwich?
That's right, a French dip sandwich. Best sandwich in the world.
All right.
But the symbolism behind it, Sherri, is that all of the women of Shakespeare, first of all, in the 1600s, they were historically played by men. And so they didn't really have their moment in the sun. But these are rich characters that are slowly being excavated throughout the 20th and 21st century. And so this kind of brings them all together, and the symbolism of them being in the Stratford Home for Rest and Rehabilitation is that their crimes in the context of the play, and maybe it was a product of the time, are looked at as such terrible indiscretions. And so that's what the writer, I think, has accomplished, is sort of gotten society's perception of how bad these women were behaving, and put them in a mental institution, and she pokes fun at that, and I think that's really a good element.
All right, this sounds so fabulous. We've got to look at a clip so the audience can see what your film is about.
Great.
Master Steve, are you a good man and true?
Huh?
Have you seen anything untoward this fine evening? Any shenanigans?
Come on, Nick. You know you're not supposed to be out here.
Master Steve, you have a seeing eye, but I don't think any of us are supposed to be here. But then again, what is here, really?
Huh?
Exactly.
Come on, Nick.
All right. Okay, so tell us about Nick, your character in the film.
So Nick Bottom is inspired, obviously, from the Midsummer Night's Dream. One of Shakespeare's rib-tickling comedies. And he's one of the most famous characters in the comedic canon. And what he does in the film, in the modern film, in Merry Maids of Madness, is he's the entertainer for the women of the ward, for the maids. He and Will, who is Will Shakespeare, they're on a different ward, and they come down and do theater and performance and puppet shows, and they generally lift the spirits of the
Okay.
maids. And it's a very important element to kind of tie everything together, to kind of give the maids the idea that something else is still out there.
So Nick is an inmate as well?
Nick's also an inmate.
Okay. And how did you prepare for this role? I noticed there's a lot of physical comedy.
Well, I did a script analysis as part of my process on the character of Nick, as if I were going to play the traditional character of Nick Bottom. And then I contrasted that with the script analysis of the Merry Maids. Now, it kind of helps because the writer and I grew up doing sketch comedy together. We founded a company called Eat, Drink, and Be Larry.
Okay.
Yeah, that did late night sketch comedy, all original material that we wrote and performed at the Gorilla Tango Theater, which no longer exists in Albuquerque, and then the Box, which is going strong on 2nd and Gold. And so it was a relatively easy process for me preparing for this role because Jen wrote the part for me.
Okay, gotcha. Wow. So what or who among the legends of comedians have inspired you?
Well, Bill Murray is a huge inspiration. He's kind of the great poobah for everybody. Woody Allen in a not performance-related way.
Can you explain that?
Absolutely. Woody Allen calls funny people that are just inherently funny, he says that they have funny bones. And I personally don't have funny bones. I know how comedy works. I get it. I have decent timing, but really the whole funny bones concept is something that I have always been in awe of, and I've tried to kind of surround myself with that type of material. So that's been an inspiration as well. And then modern comics, the guys from Whose Line Is It Anyway, specifically Bob Odenkirk, is a big inspiration.
And he's in Better Call Saul, right?
He's in Better Call Saul. He guest improvs down at the Box every now and then, so that's pretty fun.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yes, and how about female comedians? Did you grow up liking Lucy?
Oh, Lucy was great. Yeah, my grandma loved Lucy. I mean, everybody loves Lucy, but I watched those. They were in syndication, and those were always on. So Lucille Ball was fantastic, and Vivian Vance, who's a veteran performer of the Albuquerque Little Theater, from Albuquerque, and she had such timing. And that's the thing about that kind of comic timing is you cannot teach it. You either have it or you don't. And you know, sometimes you can scratch the surface if you've got some real talented people around you.
Okay. So you're now in law school. How does someone with this level of creativity in their background decide to go to law school?
Well, it's in the blood.
Okay.
You know, I'll be a 5th-generation lawyer upon passing the bar.
Okay.
All in New Mexico.
Wow.
And I fought it as long as I could, as you can tell with the acting stuff. But throughout my whole life, it just kept floating back through my visage that this was the arena that I belonged in. And I'll never stop acting.
Okay.
It's a passion for me.
So do you see yourself becoming a trial attorney where you will be able to act in front of the jury and maybe present a better case to your for your client?
I do. That's exactly what I'd like to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so as you know, we're filming in front of an audience of law students, many of whom are in your class, and some of them have questions for you. So let's see and take questions from the audience.
So Dan, I went online and I saw some of the teasers and stuff online, and they look really super funny. I was curious about the character of Marlowe and sort of the Will Marlowe. He's a man, she's a woman, she's the nurse. You know, where does that fit into the whole gender play? What's the role of Marlowe? So I was just really interested to know a little bit more about Nurse Marlowe.
Yeah, well, Nurse Marlowe's a fascinating character. If you know anything about the history of Shakespeare and the other Elizabethan playwrights, Christopher Marlowe, they were rivals. There's conspiratorial theories out there that that Marlowe wrote some of Shakespeare's material, borrowed some of Shakespeare's material, plagiarized some of Shakespeare's material, but in their writing is just it's so different that you can tell. At least I'm of the opinion that that's not the case. They were independent playwrights. It's clear they knew each other and they influenced each other. But in terms of the Merry Maids of Madness, Nurse Marlowe was kind of the controlling interest of all of Shakespeare's characters. She's the head nurse on the ward for the maids. She's very strict. She's very buttoned down. Think Christopher Marlowe's Faustus. It's very sequential, very structured, almost rigid. Whereas, Shakespeare's comedies, I think I said earlier, are rib ticklers. So that contrast is there, and it's just in terms of the gender role. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but that might be kind of an homage to the relationship that Marlowe and Shakespeare may have potentially had.
May I ask one little follow-up about that? So you used a lot of, you talked about Faustus and Christopher Marlowe, and so how accessible is the movie to people who might not know that, wherefore means why? How accessible is it to people who may not be Shakespeare experts?
Well, great question, Dean. It's accessible across the spectrum. I'd like to analogize it to it's something akin to like The Simpsons, right? The Simpsons is a cartoon that is great for kids because it's a cartoon, but it's still heavily laden with those historical and literary references that we older folk, get so much out of. So it's got something for everybody. From the folks who only know To Be or Not to Be is Shakespeare, but they don't know it's Hamlet, to the folks like me who have done the apocryphal plays like King John or Richard II. It's got something for everybody. And there is some of the language present in the film because it's so beautiful, but it's accessible because it's tied into a modern story that anybody can relate to. These characters are characters that you could bump into at the grocery store, pumping gas. They're breathing the same air as us.
Interesting. How many people leave their fiancé at the altar for a sandwich, though?
I know none.
Okay.
I know none. Although I can tell you, personally, I know none. But if you think of films such as The Runaway Bride,
yes,
and other stories, I'm
right.
sure somewhere at some time this stuff is happening.
Yes, that's true. We even had a runaway bride who ran away from back east and ended up in Albuquerque. So that was a big story at some point. So yes, they do. That does happen. Okay, so Jeff has a question.
Dan, there seems to be so much magic in Shakespeare's plays, and the setting of a mental home seems to be such a rational world. How does that world of Shakespeare become part of that rational world of a mental home?
Well, it's interesting, Jeff, because the magic leaks out or effuses out of each one of the characters. They're so beautifully written and so wonderfully cast and performed by the actors that that rational world that you're talking about cannot contain them. And without giving away too much of what is going to happen in the film, it does not contain them.
Oh, okay. Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary. I was just I thought it was very humorous that the name is Stratford, considering, I think, is it from the Stratford-on-Avon, and the fact that the very first American Shakespeare theater was actually in Stratford, Connecticut.
All right.
Yeah,
Yes.
Mary, that's a good observation, and that's something that the writer Jen Doherty was paying homage to. William Shakespeare's place of birth and primary home, Stratford-upon-Avon in England, and Stratford, Connecticut, you mentioned, was the very first Shakespearean theater in stateside in the United States, and that's intentional. And so it kind of is nice and appropriate. The Merry Maids have coalesced into a place named Stratford. Yeah. It's a nice shout out.
It's great. Okay, we have another question from the audience.
So this sounds like a great film. It looks really funny from the clip that we watched. I was wondering where it could be found and when?
Well, that is kind of a TBA, Camille. Oh. What'll happen is the world premiere is April 19th. at the Albuquerque Film and Music Experience at the Chemo Theater. After that, distribution will be finalized. So as of right now, we don't have a place where you can find it, but my recommendation to you would be to check the website, themerrymaidsofmadness.com, and look for updates on distribution following the premiere, because we're pretty confident that it'll be picked up and available to everyone after the premiere.
That sounds great, and especially because now someone can be watching this video clip of this TV show in June or July or December. So merrymaidsofmadness.com is the place where someone who's interested in seeing the film after the premiere should go.
Right.
Okay, sounds great. So how exciting. How many films have you worked on?
Independent films, big budget, I'd say probably over 30 films.
Wow, wow. And have most of them been comedies?
You know, I'd say probably about 30% of them have been comedies.
Okay.
I've struggled to break into comedy a little bit. I was always kind of locked into the male ingenue or the romantic lead or the hero typecast. You know, ever since I started acting. And then I kind of caught a break when I was cast as Sir Andrew Aguecheek in Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. And it was really funny the way that happened. The director called me, whom I had never met, and said, "Hey, Dan, I got your name from Paul Ford, who was then faculty and a mentor at UNM School of, or UNM College of Fine Arts. And he had recommended me. And the director, Brian Hansen, said, "Well, I haven't cast an Andrew Aguecheek. I could use some help." And I'm thinking, well, okay, do you want me to recommend someone? And he said, "No, I want you to play the part." And I said, wow, and it's kind of like Alec Baldwin, you know. I'm not a Baldwin, I'm not comparing myself to that guy. He's way better looking than me. But Alec Baldwin was locked into that romantic lead throughout all of his younger years. And finally, when he got a little bit older, a little bit grayer, a little bit heavier, people finally were willing to let him show off his comedy chops. And that's kind of the chance that I've gotten. So I'm really digging my heels in on that one.
And how often does that happen? You're being just offered the role versus you're having to read for the role?
Well, it depends. In this case, in Merry Maids of Madness, the part was written for me because I've known the writer and I've known the director, and we had a great working relationship. But, you know, I do have to audition when I'm an unknown commodity. But Albuquerque is such a tight-knit artistic community that once you pay your dues, they kind of know what you can do and know what they'll get out of you.
Okay. And what kind of advice would you give to someone who perhaps hasn't broken in yet, but they think that they have either good dramatic talent or good comedy talent? How would you tell them to start? Should they look for an agent? Should they look to go on auditions? Should they produce a reel? What would your advice be?
Well, the first thing would be to just audition until you can audition no more, which is not possible. The life of an actor is that of perseverance. You've got to really, really keep your nose to the grindstone. And while you're auditioning, even though people may have told you that you possess funny bones or you're inherently talented, all of that is not enough. You've got to have training.
Wow.
So continuing to hone your craft and work whatever method or process that works for you and is in demand, that's what you've got to do. And that would be my advice to an aspiring actor, is to audition all the time and continue to improve and hone your craft.
And when they're auditioning, would you advise that they come sort of dressed or made up for the role, or just come as themselves and then try to embody the character?
Well, it depends. Usually an organic process is preferable, trying to embody the character, really playing those objectives, making that clear. But in a show such as a theater production, say Hairspray, you know, coming as a Nikki Blonsky or a Ricky Lake, you know, is really a powerful thing to demonstrate to the directors. But that's a risk that you're going to take as an actor, because unless you know the director, you don't know what their dramatic choices are going to be.
Right.
And it could be completely antithetical to what they're thinking, and you may just be dismissed instantly.
Wow. And do you also run the risk that even if you audition for one part, they may want you for another part, but if you show up dressed as a particular character, the director may think, oh, that person only wants this particular role?
You are running that risk, especially at mass auditions. Generally at callbacks, which if you make the first cut, they call you back to read or sing again, the director will ask,
okay,
are you willing to accept any other roles?
Okay.
And it's very important to be honest, because you don't audition just for fun or for the experience of it. You'll gain a reputation pretty quickly as someone that's wasting directors' time.
And I understand that some actors have a segment of their resume, or whatever you call it, where they will put things like can ride a horse or will do nude scenes. Has that been your experience as well?
Absolutely, yeah. I've never done any nude scenes.
Okay, but do you have that on your?
I don't list that as on my resume.
Okay.
I wouldn't consider that a special skill.
Okay, all right.
But, you know, I leave that to the director to ask the question.
Okay.
And, you know, usually my agent will prep me before I go out on an audition saying, you know, if you're cast here, it's going to be full frontal or it's going to be, you know. So if you get the part, be prepared to bear it all.
Okay, ooh. So your agent, so your agent will tell you that in advance.
Right.
As we wrap up, what would be some of the things that you would advise people that we haven't touched on yet, who are interested in getting into the film industry?
Persevere.
Persevere.
Persevere. Really dedicate a time window. You know, whether you're going out to LA to do film and TV, whether you're going to Chicago or New York to do theater, the city will kick you around for a while, and that is the reality of it. There's no such thing as a big break instantly. That kind of stuff just doesn't happen. You've got to pay your dues and you've got to network. Be willing, as Samuel L. Jackson would say, be willing to play the stormtrooper.
Okay, all right.
You know, and be willing to be background. It's how we all cut our teeth, it's how we all pay our dues, and it's how we build our reputation. It's how we get to be known. And once your name gets out there, and you have enough on your resume to show potential directors that you can be trusted to be professional on a film set, you'll start moving up the rungs of that ladder of stardom.
Okay, and being professional and being trusted means showing up on time and being ready to start doing the work.
That's the bare minimum.
Okay.
Yeah, being prepared and doing exactly what the director or the assistant director, whomever may be in charge, doing exactly what they ask of you.
Okay.
And that's how you make it. But don't give up.
Okay.
Never give up.
And do you think having gone to law school has helped your acting in any way?
It's been an interesting process. You know, I came in feeling as though, knowing I wanted to be a trial lawyer and thinking, well, my acting skills will automatically boost me up onto that platform. But connecting the substantive nature of law to the skills that I had was a difficult process, because law is ever-changing, as is the creative process, but law is a little more buttoned down.
Yes.
And being able to connect those, once it happened, it truly was magical.
Okay.
It was great, and I feel kind of bulletproof now in terms of using my skills to get a leg up in the courtroom.
Okay, sounds great. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview and for sharing with the audience both in the room and online and elsewhere, what your life has been like getting into the acting field and coming to law school.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
It's my pleasure. And thank you, the audience, for joining us for this segment of Arts Talk with Dan Cornish.
Good job, everybody. Good job.